Okay, we're going to continue talking about this whole opposite idea, but we're going to throw you for a loop here. We have something called the opposite of the opposite. Say, what? That is crazy. So let's dive into this. Why don't we start with that opposite definition again? I know we just talked about it, but let's recap and make sure we truly understand it. Remember, the opposite, that definition means that it's the position on the number line and its relationship to 0, right? Like, remember how we talked about, so you could be so far to the right of 0 versus so far to the left, and some numbers are in the same distance away from 0, but they're in opposite positions, so their relationship to 0 is opposite of each other based on their position on the number line. So make sure you're getting that written in your notes. How do we show opposite in math? Well, I know this seems kind of silly, but there's a real easy way to do it. Once you know it, you're going to catch on super fast. But we know before, we've always talked about like a +6. We know that's a +6, or sometimes we just write the number 6 and we know it's positive, versus when we put that negative symbol here for 6. But when we talk about this negative symbol, it actually has another name. So what you're going to see us do is you're going to see some parentheses around a number, and then it's going to have a negative sign out here. Well, what this is saying, really, truly, what it means is that negative sign is asking for what's the opposite of whatever number you're talking about inside the parentheses. That's what that really means. So this negative sign, even though we say negative, or sometimes we say subtract, the other meaning of it is the word opposite. Okay? So that negative symbol has multiple meanings. Negative, subtract, or opposite. Let's talk about an actual number, or an actual example. So if I have this negative sign, the parentheses, and then 3, what this really is asking, what it truly means as far as math is concerned, you're thinking of that negative sign as an opposite. So you're asking for what's the opposite of 3. And when you start thinking of it that way, it kind of clicks and it's not so hard. So you are asking for the opposite of 3. Well, we know that is -3. Make sure you're getting these examples written in your notes. Okay, you're going to want to look at these for later. So this again is asking for the opposite of 3. That's what this is truly saying. Let's look at another example. What if I said, what's the opposite of 2? So now the symbol, again, we're looking at it as opposite of whatever number we're talking about in parentheses. So the opposite of 2, of course, is -2. Okay, let's look at one more example. This time I'm asking for the opposite of -1. This is where that whole opposite of the opposite comes in, but that is way too confusing, even though that's technically what it's called. I just want you to focus on this negative sign outside of the parentheses being the opposite of whatever you're talking about inside the parentheses. So don't worry about that opposite of the opposite. We want to say, what's the opposite of -1? Because that's really truly what this is asking. So the opposite of -1 would just be 1. Okay? So what you might be noticing is this negative symbol, particularly on the outside of the parentheses, always represents that word opposite. So it might be helpful for you to write that symbol equals opposite. It can mean negative and subtraction too, but it also can mean opposite. And when you see those parentheses, you should be signaling that we're focusing on the opposite. So I want you to look at this question. What is the opposite of 0? I want you to brainstorm with a friend. Even if you're not working with a friend right now, that's okay. This is a quick question that no matter where anyone is in the grid, they can help you out. So I want you to pause your video and just real quick chat with your neighbor what you think the answer to this could be. What is the opposite of 0? Go ahead and pause your video and give it a go. All right, I hope you pause your video and have this discussion. Once you think you have an educated guess on what you think the opposite of 0 is, write it here and get a teacher signature. We want to see what your thoughts were.